Next, we're going to hear from Pete Kadens. He's the CEO of SoCore Energy. This is going to be a name brand in the next 5 years, so I thought it was important as a company that strives to bring you not only established leaders like Terry, John, and Ann, but then also your emerging leaders of the next few years and beyond. He's the founder of CEO of SoCore, and honestly, they've had a heck of a year. They have been probably the most noticeable thing that people will see is that they are as you can see at the bottom, an Edison International company now. But that didn't happen without its own growth curve that's really kind of exciting, not only for being a Midwest company, but for any solar company. They have done projects, they've done their largest solar installations this year with more to come. Their clients have included FedEx, Walgreens, IKEA, he'll give you the whole list, Target, but it's an extensive list, and they are installing all over the country like mad, can't hire fast enough. It's an exciting time to be talking with them. On top of that, though, they collaborated with Tesla on their rather large announcement around the large commercial and home energy storage product. And Pete's story is one, I think, of being an entrepreneur. And there's a sign on their wall in their offices that says, "Be humble, hungry, and smart." And I think it's a phenomenal ethos by which to operate. But also, I think it says a lot about what motivates Pete. And I think it says a lot about why we're excited to have him speak next. So without further ado, I introduce you to Pete Kadens.
Thank you all very much for being here. Drew, thanks to you and your team for hosting such a wonderful event. I start the way I usually start when I speak in Chicago in front of energy forums, which is that to say that this proves that Californians don't have a monopoly on both good weather and on good ideas. We actually can and do generate some amazing innovations right here in Chicago. SoCore Energy is proud to be a Chicago company operating a fleet in 17 states around the country. And we're just proud to have you all here in our hometown, so thank you again. Do I have a clicker, Drew?
I think they're clicking for you.
Are they? Okay, are they going to know when to click? All right. So I guess if you could click, that'd be good. All right. So while they're clicking, I'm excited to talk to you today because I'm here to use a hockey analogy in a great hockey town. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's right behind you.
Oh, perfect. I'm here to take the gloves off. I'm here to beat down conventional paradigms on energy and work together with all of you to chart a new course for our energy future. And I'm not merely going to present something that's a regurgitation of some Bloomberg report I read about our energy future. Frankly, I'm going to talk about a concept that most people might laugh and sneer at. And I think you might find it baffling that I don't have much supporting data and that I won't use spreadsheets or analysis. My argument will be grounded in something much more fundamentally important, in my opinion. That's thousands of discussions with energy customers. First, before I do that, well, this is an interesting thing here. Oops. Huh. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, I want to discuss some beachhead data points. I want to set up the stage to talk about some fundamentals, and that'll hopefully then set up my argument. The first fundamental is this. Today, our energy economy is completely handcuffed by incentives and micro mindsets. And if you don't believe me, just look at where we're installing and deploying solar. In California and New York, 2 states. Why? Strictly because of incentives. To me, that doesn't scale. Renewables are approaching grid parity in 10 or more markets, at least by the end of 2016. But we lack the true deployment mechanisms to control the decisions that energy consumers will make. And my argument is that because of that, we will never reach the velocity that we need to reach in order to scale this business unless we truly change paradigms. Consumers are confused, if you haven't noticed. Too many vendors, too many structures. The structures are too overstructured. My opinion, to use a crass word, is the structures are cockamamie. When you've been in the industry as long as I have, going on 12 years, and you still don't understand fundamentally how some of these things work, either I'm not really smart, which is quite possible, or they're way too complicated. And I certainly know that if I don't understand it, that our consumers don't. And let's face it, whether we like it or not, energy customers make decisions with one thing and one thing in mind only: short-term savings. Energy vendors are picked on only one basis: how low can they go? Completely disregarding, in my opinion, balance sheet, quality, trustworthiness, and the relationship. And basically all the factors that we would use to identify where we're gonna live, a home we're gonna buy, or a school we're gonna send our children to, none of that, in my opinion, is used to assess the energy provider that you're gonna hire. So how can we change the energy buyer's paradigm? How can we do a course correct here? I'll argue we have a moral imperative to take cues from industries that have successfully gotten both the buyer and the seller to coalesce around a vision that works for both parties. So I'll give you some examples. We spent $5 trillion last year in the United States on construction, almost all of which was via fixed price contracts. We spent $24 billion on gym memberships, and you pay the same amount irrespective of how many times you actually attended the gym. This is a good one. Southwest Airlines. They spent $5.2 billion on jet fuel, something we mostly think about as a variable input cost, especially in the airline industry. But they bought 94% of this power in fixed price collar contracts, where they knew exactly what the cost was gonna be. And just for fun, we spent $12 billion on the Super Bowl, $44 billion on direct mail, of which less than 1% was actually read, $11 billion on Halloween, and my personal favorite, $7 billion on garden gnomes. The point is that we as Americans buy almost everything in a fixed price manner, irrespective of consumption, except, of course, garden gnomes. We love fixed prices. We love budget certainty. Why? Because we're absolutely terrified of risk. We're absolutely terrified of volatility. We'd prefer to let the experts assume the risk. In exchange, we'll happily take budget certainty, and maybe we'd even pay more. For whatever reason, though, here in the US, this customer preference has not been identified by the energy industry. The argument I make is that we're simply not getting inside the psyche of the energy buyer, and we're not doing a good enough job listening to the energy buyer. Again, after literally thousands of conversations with the energy buyer, I can tell you a couple things. One is they don't want long-term contracts. Easy enough. Two, they don't want contracts that look like this. I think we know all of that. Three, they don't want huge termination payments. Four, they don't want excessive volatility. And lastly, and most importantly, and I hope this is one thing you take away, customers, at least our customers in the Fortune 500, do not want siloed vendor relationships. My partner, Andy Perrin at TJX, TJ Maxx, Marshall's Home Goods stores, 3,000 stores around the country in 43 states. He talks all the time about, he's got 167 vendors. He's got his solar guys. He's got his geothermal guys. He's got his retail electric suppliers. He's got his regulated utilities. He's got his lighting guys, his EE guys, and guess what? All of that means that he's got to work a lot harder because it's a lot more transactions, a lot more contracts. And when all this guy really wants to do is leave at 5 o'clock, but we're not listening to him. So my point today is that, I'm gonna present a paradigm of thought, and people, again, will shake their heads at this, I believe. They might walk out of the room saying I'm a complete idiot, that I haven't thought through the risks, the nuances, and the perverse incentives of the structure I'm gonna present. That's okay. All of those assessments will probably be accurate. With that stated, good quote from Mary Shelley, who's the author of Frankenstein. She said, invention, it must be humbly admitted, does not consist in creating out of void, but rather out of chaos. And I will argue today that the energy economy is in complete and total chaos. We have amateurs making significant energy decisions and budget decisions that are made in a complete vacuum without good supporting data. We have hundreds of thousands of vendors. No one knows how these solutions integrate. And customers rarely make decisions on anything outside of price. We put solar panels on the most inefficient buildings you have ever seen. And the best analogy I can give you is it's roughly equivalent to putting sweet rims on a clunker car. It's time to take control of the consumer's energy decisions, to give them what they really want, to let the experts control the variables that they're far more adept at controlling, and to consolidate our energy interest around more holistic solutions. We've got to get a little nuts here. I'm hearing all this stuff about storage is going to change our energy economy, and all these other things are going to change our energy economy. And to that I say, actually, I don't think it will. Not until we change the way buyers buy and the way providers sell. Let me take you on a quick tangent. I know you're excited to get to my eventual point here. But I think it's important to provide a proxy example. Take a quick look at the construction industry. Probably the most boring, low-margin, antiquated, high-risk industry in the world. And I will say that in my time constructing solar projects across 17 states, I know that I'm guilty of constructing projects basically the same way that we constructed the pyramids. Not much has changed. But one company out there got a little crazy and challenged conventional wisdom, and they're winning. They've shifted the paradigm more than any other company that I've ever seen. And you'll see here a little time lapse. I'm going to talk to the time lapse. This company is called the Broad Group. How many people in here have heard of the Broad Group by any chance? Almost none. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. So the Broad Group started with a very simple premise that construction takes too long. And because it takes too long, it costs too much. Very simple premise. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to challenge the pervasive paradigm that all of us were simply willing to accept over many, many years. And so the Broad Group, you'll see here, built this 15-story building. He built the skeleton, the shell, in 2 days. They built the entire building, inside and out, totally constructed, in 6 days. You'll see here we're 22 hours through, and at 15 stories, we're just about there. It's pretty incredible. Now, most people are going to say, of course, well, shoddy construction, the place is going to fall down if there's an earthquake. It's going to, things are going to collapse. They also built a 30-story building in 30 days. Now, I will tell you, they've actually never had a work safety incident in the history of the company. All of their facilities are built to 9.0 magnitude earthquake resistance. And they have 99% less construction waste than a normal construction site of this size. How'd they do it? It actually wasn't a David Copperfield or a Nick Wallenda miracle. They actually just thought differently about the logistics process and about prefabrication. They thought like no company had ever thought before. They were willing to challenge conventional paradigms. Here you see the constructed building 6 days later. Absolutely incredible. I think the Broad Group is one of the companies that will change our world from a construction perspective. By the way, for those of you who are getting your resumes ready for the Broad Group, you should know that in order to be an employee of the Broad Group, you have to recite word for word the life manual penned by the company founder, Zhang. That includes tips on saving energy, brushing your teeth, and rearing your children. And probably most notably, and this is where we're going to lose a lot of potential resume submittals, you also have to be able to run 7.5 miles. So it's an intense work culture, but as you can see, they're extremely productive. The Broad Group has proven that it's okay to challenge what people think is possible. Oops, I don't know what happened there. Now let's transition back to energy. I set it up with the Broad Group with my beachhead data points, and now I'm going to come back to energy. And these companies have been thought of as innovators. My argument is that we can flip this industry on its head, much like these individuals and these companies have. So here's what I propose. All right, you don't have to read the spreadsheet, but there's interesting numbers. But probably more material is the structure I'm going to present. So I propose that us, the people in this room and the energy experts, begin to assume and manage all variable risk. That we take control of our energy consumers' meters, and we make every energy decision for them. In exchange, we collect a fixed fee from them, irrespective of how much they consume, of what the demand looks like. We collect a fixed fee. I want to set this up with an actual example. There were 4 REITs, real estate investment trusts, in the United States last year, that between their common area load and their tenant load spent $2.7 billion on kilowatt hours. Again, 4 companies, $2.7 billion on electricity. Vast majority of that spend was directed by the tenants, who don't know much about energy, frankly. And there's little incentive for the landlords to put energy infrastructure in place because energy is just a pass-through expense for them. It doesn't matter. And so imagine just for 1 second that we as the energy providers collect a fixed fee of, let's say, $2.6 billion, slightly less than what these organizations spent last year on energy. And apply a small escalation year over year or whatnot. But basically, they got all of their energy, regardless of how much they consume, for that amount. We do this over the next 10 years. So effectively, we lock them in at today's prices with a small escalation. No renewal contracts in 3 years, no 30% spikes, no questions about what are the decisions they have to forfeit because they have to understand what their energy expense looks like first. We, the energy experts, bundle up this $2.7 billion in the dereg markets. We take that portion out to the market, and presumably we're going to get closer to wholesale prices than retail prices. We, the energy experts, take control of the customer meter and make all decisions at these extremely inefficient facilities with a heavy incentive of reducing kilowatt-hour demand because we keep the spread effectively between the fixed price that our customers pay us and what we pay to deploy the power to that facility. We put in LEDs. We put in distributed generation bundled with storage. We invest heavily in smoothing out the operations of the business. Think of the alignment between the client, the REIT, and the universe. Guaranteed power at a fixed price regardless of consumption for the next 10 years for your customer. A REIT who's the beneficiary of better energy infrastructure for the first time ever and of a fixed rental stream because we have to pay them a fixed rental stream to get access to their tenants. And a universe, frankly, that is finally aligned, the constituency down here on Earth, where there really is this nexus between capitalism and environmental consciousness. Going back to the notion of managing through and then eliminating the chaos, this insane idea may actually not be so insane after all, if you consider the following benefits. It makes the considerations and determinations for consumers much simpler, and it forces vendor decisions that are much more closely linked to trust, credibility, quality, versus simply transactional price determinations. Customers respond to messages. And the message we send for the first time ever, and I hope everyone realizes this, our customers don't give a hoot about energy. It is a nuisance to them. It is not their core business. We're going to make it easy on them to focus on their business, not on their energy procurement. And we're simultaneously going to dramatically mitigate their risk. Now, I'd buy that for $1. It affords the consumers the ability to lock in the entire energy input cost for a long time, while outsourcing the risk to an expert risk manager. And I don't know if you've noticed, but presumably some of you have, the energy industry isn't exactly a very high-margin business. Why? I argue because the energy solution providers control too few of the variables. But when we really use our brains and we control more of the variables, we can create a rather substantial spread between the fixed price that our customers are paying us and what we actually pay to deploy power to our customers. I think a lucrative business would be something we'd all welcome. And you may ask, so why now is the time to proceed? Why would I propose this now? What about the systemic environment makes this the time to move forward with something this crazy? Well, I think we're seeing a lot of new commercially viable technologies come out on the market. And for the first time, these technologies, we understand how these technologies can work together in harmony versus in silos. We now have a vision of a smart city, of a smart community, and a smart building. And we actually have the technology to execute against that vision. Whether our consumers can become energy independent and off the grid or not, that's not my argument. I don't know if that's going to happen today or ever. And I argue actually as someone who's owned by a utility that that probably won't happen. But what I am certain of is that our customers would love to have energy bundled in a comprehensive suite of energy solutions, and they would love to be fully aligned with their partners. Think about it, and this is the most confounding thing to me. I'm a solar PPA, I'm a solar developer. I sell power by the kilowatt hour as my customers consume it. So I actually want my customer to consume as many kilowatt hours as possible. Explain that to me. I want my customer to consume as much power as possible. Because in order for me to hit my threshold returns, they have to consume a lot of power. And by the way, because solar can only provide a certain percentage of a building's load, most of our customers, we offset between 10 and 50% of their annual load, but probably err more towards the side of 10 or 15% of annual load. What I'm actually asking for is I'm saying, I want you to consume a lot of power, but because I only have a certain chunk of it, I want you to consume a lot of power from a host of sources, many of which that are not renewable, clean, and green. Is that aligned with the eventual goal here? Isn't the eventual goal to consume less, to waste less, and to expose our environment less? So some people ask me on my team, why would I present a concept like this so early in the game before being down the road further? And won't we simply be educating our prospective competitors? My thought is that what we discussed here today is a market movement and a market challenge, and that our company would never be able to execute on this platform until the broader market accepts this as viable. Until people believe that this is the way that they can buy and sell power, this will never happen. And so it truly is the notion of the rising tide lifts all boats. I do hope that we can continue to discuss a market shift, a market paradigm shift like this, and I'm excited to discuss it with anyone who wants to discuss it later today. So thanks for your time and energy. Appreciate it.